Have you ever been so loyal to a company that you carried it on your back, only to watch the people in charge treat you like you were disposable? Have you ever wondered what would happen if the one person holding everything together finally walked away? And here's the real question I want you to think about before this story begins. What would you do if the company you built with your own hands fired you for doing the right thing? Tell me in the comments, because I know every one of you has lived a moment where silence felt heavier than speaking up. My name is Rachel Morgan. I am 38 years old, and I was born and raised in a quiet town in Colorado where people still believe that hard work is not something you brag about, but something you simply do. For the last 16 years, I worked as the operations liaison for North Star Transport Grid, a company valued at more than $4 billion and considered one of the most influential supply chain networks in the country. On paper, my job sounded technical and ordinary, but in reality, I was the person who held the entire organization together in ways most executives never even noticed. Every dock worker, every fuel distributor, every inspector, and every union leader knew my voice before they knew my face, because I was the one who picked up the phone at 2 a.m. when something went wrong. I was the one who soothed tempers before arguments turned into walkouts, the one who kept delicate agreements alive, and the one who made sure hundreds of trucks did not sit idle because of one misunderstanding. North Star ran on logistics, but the truth was that it also ran on trust, and I spent more than a decade earning it. When Evan Carlisle, the founder's son, stepped into the role of Chief Executive Officer, he looked at my position and dismissed it as outdated. He told me he wanted a company built on energy, sparkle, excitement, and personal branding, not on what he called old-fashioned operational glue. I remember standing in his office, listening to him talk about innovation while having no idea how the real workers kept this empire breathing. In that moment, a quiet certainty settled in my chest. Trouble had clocked in early, and even though I did not know what was coming, I felt the shift. A storm was building, and I was no longer sure I wanted to keep holding up the sky for people who refused to see it. Evan's attitude settled over the office like a heavy fog, the kind that makes you feel lost even inside a place you once knew by heart. He loved announcing changes with a dramatic flair, as if every decision he made was part of a grand performance. So when he called an all-hands meeting for senior staff one Friday afternoon, I could feel the tension rising before he even stepped onto the platform. He smiled like a man revealing a magic trick and told us that he was hosting a mandatory leadership retreat at a luxury mountain lodge the following weekend. He spoke about team bonding, emotional alignment, and what he called synchronizing our personal brands. I remember watching the room, seeing the forced smiles and the resigned nods, and feeling a quiet knot form in the center of my chest. The date of his retreat fell on the same weekend as a highly sensitive medical plasma shipment that required precision, oversight, and immediate communication if anything went wrong. I had coordinated those shipments for years, and I knew the risks. If the temperature fluctuated or if a route was delayed, patients who relied on those materials could suffer. There were no second chances with plasma. When the meeting ended, I approached Evan calmly and told him that I would not be able to attend the retreat because I needed to supervise the shipment personally. I expected at least a moment of consideration, but instead he stared at me with a mix of disbelief and annoyance, as if I had contradicted him during his own birthday party. He said, "Rachel, refusing this retreat tells me you are not aligned with our new culture." His voice was smooth, but underneath I heard the threat. I explained the importance of the shipment, but he brushed it off with a wave, insisting that technology could handle the process. In that moment, resentment stirred in me like a slow burn. He was not just careless. He was reckless. And he had no idea how fragile his empire truly was. The morning after I declined his retreat, the air inside the building felt different, colder, almost metallic. People avoided eye contact with me, and I could sense whispers fading every time I passed by. It was the kind of atmosphere that tells you a decision has already been made and everyone else knows it except you. Before I could even settle into my chair, My internal phone flashed with a message instructing me to report to Evan's office immediately. No greeting, no explanation, just a command. When I stepped into his office, sunlight flooded the room through floor-to-ceiling windows, but it could not warm the tension that hung between us. Evan stood behind his desk, arms folded, his expression smooth and empty, as though he were trying to imitate authority rather than embody it. He did not ask me to sit. He did not even pretend to ease into the conversation. He simply said, "Rachel, this is not working. You are not a team player, and your refusal yesterday confirmed it." The words landed with a strange stillness. 16 years of service, loyalty, and sacrifice dismissed in one breath. I reminded him calmly that I managed the critical agreements that kept Northstar's trucks on the road, that I was the authorized liaison with multiple ports and unions, and that these relationships were built on years of trust and human connection. I told him these bonds could not be transferred to a cloud server or delegated to someone unfamiliar with the people behind the contracts. He barely listened. He lifted his hand like he was brushing away dust from his jacket and said, "We will adapt. Technology will replace outdated processes." Then he called security. They took my badge and escorted me out, as if I were a stranger trespassing in the very place I had held together for more than a decade. Walking through those doors, I felt the hurt, the shock, and underneath it all, the beginning of something sharper, something steadier. A quiet promise forming in my chest. If he wanted to run Northstar without me, he was about to learn what that truly meant. When the security guard closed the glass doors behind me, the world outside felt strangely quiet, like the universe had stopped just long enough for me to understand what had happened. 16 years of dedication reduced to nothing by a man who cared more about his personal image than the system that kept thousands of workers employed. I sat in my car for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, letting the mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief settle into something clearer. The company I kept together like a carefully woven thread had cut me loose without a second thought. But Evan had forgotten one very important detail. I had spent years strengthening Northstar's contracts, building safeguards to protect workers from corporate decisions that ignored the reality of operations. That was how Clause 9 was born. It was a provision I negotiated personally with vendors, ports, and union leaders. It stated that if my position ended without proper transition and certification of a replacement, every partner had the right to suspend services, credit, and vendor support immediately until a qualified liaison was in place. At the time, it was meant to ensure continuity and protect against leadership negligence. I never imagined it would become the lever in a moment like this. Sitting in my car, I opened my tablet, my hands still trembling with emotion, but my mind becoming sharper by the second. I drafted a simple message to every major partner, attaching the relevant contract section. My voice in the email was calm, professional, and exact. I informed them that my employment at Northstar had ended abruptly, and under Clause 9, they now had full discretion to pause operations until proper reauthorization occurred. I pressed send. Nothing dramatic, no grand announcements, no thunderclaps in the sky. Just a quiet action rooted in the truth, and only minutes later, the notification started rolling in, service suspended, credit paused, access restricted. Northstar had pushed me out. Now they were about to feel what it meant to run without the backbone they never saw. The first alert came before I even left the parking lot. A fuel provider informed me that all Northstar fuel cards were now frozen. Another message followed from a major dock supervisor, letting me know that Northstar trucks were being held at the gate until proper liaison verification was received. Within minutes, my screen lit up like a storm breaking open, a cascade of notifications arriving one after another. Vendors paused credit. Ports restricted entry. Unions refused to authorize dispatch schedules. Clause 9 had done exactly what it was designed to do, and it was unfolding with the precision of a domino line pushed by a gentle fingertip. I imagined Evan sitting in his sleek office, unaware of the wave about to crash over him. At first, He probably believed it was a minor glitch or a routine system error. That was always his instinct, to blame technology or a process he did not understand. But as the minutes passed, I knew reality would hit him with the force of a freight truck. He would try to log into the internal systems to assess the issue, only to discover that the two-factor authentication for critical operational access was still tied to my personal number. He had fired me so quickly that he never updated the protocols. The irony would have been amusing if it had not been so predictable. Reports began pouring in that trucks were stalled in yards, drivers were confused and frustrated, and dispatchers had no authority to clear anything without my approval. The company that once moved goods across the country with effortless flow was now a frozen machine, locked at every joint. I sat there watching it unfold, not with satisfaction, but with a deep sense of inevitability. I had warned him that trust and relationships were the true engines of North Star. Instead, he replaced experience with ego. Now the cost of that decision was unfolding faster than he ever imagined. As the alerts continued flooding my phone, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and clarity. I had given North Star so much of my life, and yet the moment I stepped away, it became painfully obvious how fragile the company truly was. But while North Star unraveled, another message arrived. One that shifted everything. It was from Diana Holt, the vice president of Titan Freight Network, North Star's most formidable competitor. Her tone was steady, professional, and surprisingly warm. She said she had heard about recent leadership decisions at North Star and wanted to speak with me as soon as possible. I knew Titan watched North Star closely, but for Diana to reach out so quickly meant they understood exactly what Clause 9 had triggered. And they recognized what a power vacuum looked like. We met at a small diner on the edge of town, a place where nobody bothers you unless you ask for a refill. Diana walked in with the posture of someone who had spent years steering a company with intention and respect, the opposite of Evan's hollow performance of leadership. She listened closely as I explained what had happened, not just the firing, but the years of building relationships, nurturing trust, and maintaining stability in a world that rarely offered it. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Rachel, someone with your experience and reputation does not walk out of a building. She gets recruited." She slid a folder toward me. Inside was an offer that made my breath catch, a senior executive role overseeing national operations, a full team, complete autonomy, and more respect than I had ever received at North Star. She did not pressure me. She simply said, "You deserve a place that understands your worth." For the first time that day, I felt a sense of direction instead of loss. North Star might be collapsing, but my career was not ending. It was shifting toward a company that actually valued the backbone, not just the branding. While I reviewed Titan's offer later that evening, my phone buzzed again. This time with messages far more urgent than account suspensions or port lockouts. Sam Torres, one of North Star's dispatch coordinators who had always treated me with genuine respect, sent a brief text. "Rachel, something is very wrong, call me." His voice shook when he answered. He explained that Evan, desperate to restart operations, had overridden internal safety protocols and hired a non-certified driver through a digital contractor app to move a Class 3 flammable load. The unions refused to authorize any movement without me, but Evan insisted he could modernize the process. My stomach tightened. A shipment like that required specialized handling, trained escorts, and strict temperature monitoring. It was not something you handed to a random freelancer looking for a quick job. Before I could respond, another call came through. This time from Hank Wilder, a seasoned hazmat specialist I had worked with for years. His voice was raw, the kind of tone that only appears when disaster stops pretending. "Rachel, it happened," he said quietly. The untrained driver took a restricted road. Fog was heavy. He lost control. I closed my eyes, already imagining the rest. A crash, a ruptured container, chemicals igniting in an instant. Hank continued, "The fire is massive. Emergency teams are scrambling." They are shutting down everything. Within an hour, the incident dominated the regional news. The blaze lit the night sky like a warning flare, and the federal authorities arrived before dawn. Every single North Star fleet vehicle was grounded, pending investigation. No shipments, no movement, no lifelines. The company was no longer simply stalled, it was legally frozen. Listening to the reports, I felt no satisfaction, only sorrow. This was not revenge. This was the consequence of arrogance. Arrogance so blinding that Evan had ignored every safeguard built to protect people, not profits, and now, the ripple had become a tidal wave, crashing directly onto the company he believed he could control with charisma alone. The morning after the chemical disaster, the world felt heavier, as if every headline carried the weight of what North Star had become. I was sitting in my kitchen, watching the news play footage of firefighters battling the blaze, when my phone rang again, this time from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was older, steady, and filled with a recognizable regret. "Rachel, this is Robert Carlyle. I need to see you." Robert, Evan's father and the retired founder of North Star, had always treated me with respect. He was stern at times, but he understood operations because he had built the company from the ground up, not from a stage with a spotlight. He asked me to meet him at the small regional airport just outside the city, and I agreed. When I arrived, I saw him standing alone near the arrival doors, holding a worn leather briefcase and looking like a man who had just witnessed his life's work fall through his fingers. He did not waste time on pleasantries. "Rachel," he said quietly, "tell me exactly what happened." We sat in my car as I explained the Retreat Ultimatum, the firing, the activation of Clause 9, and the catastrophic decision to send a hazardous load with an untrained driver. With every detail, his shoulders sank a little more. He closed his eyes, exhaling deeply. "My son has destroyed what took me 40 years to build." There was a long silence before he looked directly at me and said, "I want you back. I will remove Evan. I will give you full authority to rebuild what he broke." His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with sincerity. It should have felt validating, even triumphant, but instead something inside me settled with calm certainty. I shook my head gently. "Robert, I am already moving forward, and North Star is too far gone to repair." His face softened, resigned, as he understood the truth. The company had crossed a line that even I could not bring back. For the first time, he looked less like a founder and more like a father grieving the choices of his child. After leaving Robert at the airport, I sat in my car for a long moment, letting the silence settle. I felt sympathy for him, but sympathy could not reverse the damage his son had unleashed. North Star was not just collapsing from operational failures anymore. It was unraveling from within, and the real truth surfaced only a few days later in a way that both angered and solidified my resolve. Diana called me into her office at Titan Freight with a stack of financial reports placed neatly on her desk. Her expression was firm, the kind she saved for serious matters. She slid the papers toward me and said, "Rachel, you need to see this." What I saw made my stomach twist. Evan had quietly siphoned millions of dollars out of North Star's retirement fund, diverting money intended for drivers, mechanics, warehouse employees, and long-term staff into private accounts and lavish personal expenses, luxury vacations, high-end memberships, a rented penthouse suite in another city, all paid for with the retirement savings of people who had served the company with honest labor. The betrayal hit me harder than anything else he had done. Operations could be rebuilt. Contracts could be renegotiated. But stealing from people who gave their lives to keep North Star functioning? That was unforgivable. I knew then that walking away was not enough. The people who trusted me for years needed protection, and nobody inside North Star was going to fight for them now. I contacted Robert and told him what I had found. The heartbreak in his voice was unmistakable. He asked what could be done, but the answer did not lie in saving North Star. The answer lay in saving its people. I approached Diana with an idea that sounded unbelievable at first. Titan Freight would acquire North Star for $1 single. But only if Titan agreed to absorb every retirement account, every pension, and every benefit owed to the employees. It was not a business deal. It was a rescue mission. And to my relief, Titan accepted. The $1 acquisition moved faster than anyone expected. Titan Freight's legal team worked through the night, securing every pension, every benefit, and every long-promised retirement plan North Star employees had spent decades relying on. Once the agreement was signed, the final piece fell into place. The authorities stepped in. Evan was arrested for embezzlement, charged with multiple counts of financial misconduct and reckless endangerment, and escorted out of the same building where he once strutted with empty confidence. It was surreal to watch the news anchors announce the downfall of a man who believed he could reinvent an entire industry through charisma alone. Yet the only feeling I had was a calm, steady release, like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. The transition into Titan Freight was swift. Their leadership welcomed me with respect and clarity, not performative excitement, as I stepped into my new office. Spacious, quiet, overlooking the city. I felt something I had not experienced in years. I felt valued. A plaque with my name had already been placed on the door. A full operations team waited to introduce themselves, eager, grounded, and prepared. It felt like entering a home I did not know I was missing. A few days later, a letter arrived addressed to me in handwriting I recognized immediately. Evan. It was several pages long, but I did not read past the first 2 sentences. I could already hear the excuses, the blame, the attempts to justify what could never be justified. I fed the letter into the shredder beside my desk and watched the strips fall into the bin, a quiet ending to a loud chapter. I did not destroy North Star. I simply stopped carrying it on my back. The truth was simple. When competence is ignored, collapse is predictable. And when integrity stands its ground, new beginnings rise from the rubble. As I sat in my new office, the sun reflecting off the city skyline, I finally allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. I had protected the workers. I had chosen dignity over fear. And for the first time in a long time, I was fully, undeniably in control of my own story. If there is one lesson in everything you just heard, it is this. When someone underestimates your value, the universe has a way of reminding them. Often louder than they expect, you do not need to scream. You do not need to destroy. Sometimes, you simply step back and let the truth do the work for you. And when you finally choose yourself, the world opens doors you never knew existed. So tell me, what part of this story hit you the hardest? What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts below. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their worth. And do not forget to follow the channel so you do not miss the next story. Your voice keeps this community alive.